People say Rapido is banned or say bike taxi is illegal, but that's not the case, is it?
I guess this is one example of where you are probably prioritizing some vested interest. As residents of Bangalore, we should have the ability to choose whatever option we want. 70-80% of Indian roads are two-wheelers, not four-wheelers. India is the largest two-wheeler market in the world.
Is policy the biggest barrier in the company's growth or overall India's growth?
I don't think policy is the biggest barrier, it's clarity. There are 280 million two-wheeler owners in India. Approximately 18% of them are unemployed, students or working part-time. Hence, there's almost 45-50 million two-wheeler owners in India that are looking for part-time or full-time job.
Goa not having Uber and Ola, what is your viewpoint on that?
As a government, your first priority should be how do you make day-to-day life more comfortable, safe and affordable to your citizens. Customer is king, let him decide.
Are we on the right track when it comes to EVs in India?
EVs surprisingly been around for 50-60 years. 2-3 years ago, I went to Maruti and I asked, EV क्यों नहीं बेच रहे हो? तो उन्होंने बोला, कुणाल, पूरे महीने में कितनी EVs बिकती हैं? 20,000. Maruti has about 45-50% market share. He says, even if I get 70% market share of EV, I'll get 6,000 cars, 8,000 cars. Does that change my market share as a whole?
What will it take for us to beat China?
Because I'm not here to beat China.
Kunal, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to jarxchange.
Thank you, Akash. Thanks for having me.
कैसे आए Rapido पे? You know, it is a right time to do a mobility podcast because so much has been happening, and I don't want to put you on a spot, but just want to understand.
I'm sure you do.
नहीं, मतलब as long as you're
Welcome to it. Yeah.
But क्या हो रहा है? When will Karnataka get its bike taxi policy? Why is it? These are all layman questions that, you know, how many people book Rapido in our office and suddenly they can't now, and then it's like यार दिल्ली में कर सकते हैं, जब हैदराबाद में कर सकते हैं तो कर्नाटका क्यों नहीं कर सकते? So what's happening? Just give us a sense of why is it that you have to be parceled from wherever you're coming on a bike taxi?
I think Karnataka's ban on Rapido is pretty much on brand to what the Karnataka's government is doing in a number of other ways. So I think it's unfortunate. I think ultimately you've got to understand what the market and the people require, right? I mean, we talk about ease of doing business. What about ease of living? I think as a government, your first priority should be how do you make day-to-day life more comfortable, safe and affordable to your citizens. I guess this is one example of where you are probably prioritizing some vested interest, who for whatever reason feels that Rapido is in some ways competing with them. But I don't think that's the case. Ultimately, in a free market, every player wins. If you provide an affordable, safe, convenient solution, customers बढ़ते हैं, demand बढ़ता है, opportunities to make money goes up. अगर आप बाइक टैक्सी करेंगे वो एक डिफरेंट प्राइस पॉइंट पे है, थ्री व्हीलर एक डिफरेंट प्राइस पॉइंट पे, यूज केस अलग अलग है. What we've seen is our data shows is that a majority of two-wheeler Rapido customers also use three-wheelers. Because the use case is different. अगर मैं अकेला जा रहा हूँ तो my preference would be to use a Rapido. If I'm traveling with family, I might travel in a three-wheeler. If I'm going to the train station, तो मैं गाड़ी बुला लेता हूँ. To say that one competes with the other, there might be an overlap, of course. But I think ultimately you have to let the customers choose what they want. If you let the customers decide, it actually forces everybody in that ecosystem to be fair and to be transparent and to be customer centric. तो इससे ज़्यादा क्या बढ़िया हो सकता है? Ease of life में चाहिए होगा तो, I mean, we should, as residents of Bangalore, we should have the ability to choose whatever option we want, right? Ultimately, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग choose करेंगे तो सबका फायदा होएगा.
Especially Bangalore, मुझे लगता है.
Especially Bangalore, which I think is a city that, given the state of affairs on roads, is probably the one that needs the maximum amount of options for its citizens. Not just Rapido, but public transportation, metro hai ya bus hai, shared mobility systems hai ya personal mobility hai. Ultimately, customer is king, let him decide.
Can you tell me in 2 minutes that what exactly is the problem, in the sense that is People say Rapido is banned or say bike taxi is illegal, but that's not the case, is it?
Absolutely not.
तो क्या हो रहा है?
देखिए, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने एक क्लैरिफिकेशन इशू किया है, अलाउइंग द यूज ऑफ privately registered two-wheelers for commercial purposes. So theoretically, once that note was issued, the use of private vehicles for bike taxis became legal. But transport is a state subject. Central government ने बोला है two-wheeler, and this is something that we went and made a representation and showed that there are 280 million two-wheeler owners in India, out of which approximately 18% of them are unemployed, students or working part-time. Hence, there's almost 45-50 million two-wheelers owners in India that are looking for part-time or full-time jobs. So there is enough capacity available within the existing car park of two-wheelers which are looking for jobs. Now, India is a capital deficit country, means यहाँ पैसों की कमी है, capital है नहीं, rate of interest बहुत ज़्यादा है. Why is it that we should force individuals to buy a two-wheeler if they want to create jobs on mobility platforms such as Rapido? And the central government agreed. They said, हाँ, समझ गया 50 million two-wheelers owners हैं जो नौकरी ढूंढ रहे हैं, और यहाँ इतने लाखों करोड़ों Indians are looking for mobility solutions.
Plus जो मेरी vehicle है उसका usage
exactly
is in 24 hours. I remember data from long time.
So that's brilliant. So out of the 280 plus million, वो तो बढ़ गया है. I'm talking about 8 years ago. अब तो 200-300 से ऊपर million two-wheelers owners होंगे. Out of that, the average utilization of a two-wheeler is about 10 to 11%, which means 90% of the time a vehicle is sitting parked. And when the vehicle is even being utilized, 70% of the time the second rear seat is empty. So when you look at that available capacity, it's like, how do I increase and optimize an existing asset that is lying with people and help create jobs for them? That was the nucleus of Rapido, saying, can I help these individuals जिन्होंने बाइक खरीद चुके हैं, जिनका EMI दे रहे हैं, इंश्योरेंस दे रहे हैं, उनको नौकरी दिलवाई जाए. Now, second is, when we talk about shared mobility solutions, as a customer, people look for three things: affordability, safety and convenience. अगर आप सारे products को देखेंगे, आपको सिर्फ एक या दो चीज़ें मिलती हैं, तीनों नहीं मिलती. सिर्फ बाइक टैक्सी एक ऐसी mobility solution है जिसमें which is affordable, it is safe and it's convenient. When I say convenient, it means point to point, not multimodal. Public transportation is cheap, but it's neither convenient and sometimes not safe. Uber is very safe, very convenient, but very expensive. So finally, you have an option here which is affordable, safe and convenient. So when we made that representation, the government agreed, and we said just allowing this one change in the Motor Vehicles Act can potentially create 10 to 20 million jobs in the country.
Wow.
Whether it's bike taxi, whether it's food delivery, or now whether it's quick commerce, all of these requires some form of mobility services, and you've got an installed base of two-wheeler owners that can be gainfully employed in these areas. But transportation being a state subject, every state government was requested by the central government to issue the guidelines under which these platforms could operate. Rapido has probably spent the last 6 or 7 years making representations to each state government, says, please हमको guidelines दे दीजिए, we'll operate under those. Majority of states have issued those guidelines. Delhi has issued them, Haryana has issued them, Uttar Pradesh has issued them, Rajasthan has issued them. And whether Uber, Ola, Rapido, all of them are following these guidelines. Karnataka is one state for some reason, I don't want to get into it, has, after repeated requests, is still not yet issued the guidelines. Failing to do that, Rapido went and made a representation to the High Court saying, can you please inform or request the state government to issue guidelines? Now, once you get the High Court involved, of course, when they realize that, okay, now Rapido is operating because the guidelines have not been issued, what they've said is, okay, we understand where you're coming from. We would like to request the state government to issue these said guidelines, pending which please don't operate.
Which makes sense. जब तक guidelines नहीं है, आप operate नहीं कीजिए. Which is not a
that is why we think it's not that bike taxis have been quote unquote banned. They have put on hold till the state government issues the guidelines. Now the question is,
when?
Knowing fully well that this is a service that millions of citizens are using, has created almost 600,000 jobs in the state. I honestly feel they should issue those guidelines quickly, but it's difficult to say when that's going to happen.
Another notification came in the last couple of weeks, I think. Goa not having Uber and Ola. What is your viewpoint on that? I've stayed in Goa for a long time. I have a lot of Goan friends, so I have some viewpoint. But should Goa government allow Ola and Uber or any other private company to enter their state? Yes or no?
Absolutely, they should. And the reason is simple. Ultimately, let customers know whether you're the residents of that state or if you're visiting as a tourist, which is in Goa is a large case. Allow people the choice and the freedom to choose whether they want to be on a platform, choose a local taxi, book directly, or book from a hotel. Ultimately, when you land, you're going to a hotel. I think there is a misconception that Uber and Ola will come and create unemployment in local. Ultimately, what people have to realize that 100% of those working on Uber and Ola are local citizens or local residents. So if you look at today the installed base of taxis in Goa, they're probably significantly underutilized. They're typically doing 2 to 4 rides a day. I think when you bring the power of aggregator platforms on board, you have fundamentally the ability to increase the potential revenue that you can make. When people get the convenience, even if you're a local, that in 5 minutes I can order a car that will pick me up, I may start taking an Uber or an Ola to go shopping or to go out to meet people. I may be encouraged to do that if it becomes convenient and affordable. I feel that platforms like Uber and Ola will actually be beneficial to all the current people who people refer to as the quote-unquote the taxi mafia. They can actually make significantly more because by creating a new sets of demand that don't exist today. So it's not just tourists that need these needs. Ultimately, if you look at Bangalore, we may not have a lot of tourists, but look at the demand that has happened. People go out more. People are more comfortable with catching these. Same can happen with Goa. Today, if mentally I was comforted by the fact that if I'm going to land in Goa and in 10 minutes there's going to be an Uber that I can book and go to my hotel, I won't ask the hotel to send me a cab.
The counter is that the price will be controlled by the cab companies, the platforms.
I disagree with you. Ultimately, the price is determined by the market. So we have to understand one thing. As a marketplace, okay, I am there to create and find a point of equilibrium where supply is willing to work at a certain price point and where demand is willing to pay that price, right? If people think that Uber and Ola has the ability to decide at what price they can sell their goods and services is absolutely incorrect. I may go and say, okay, I'm going to charge 100 rupees a kilometer, but customers refuse to pay that. I'm going to be forced to reduce that. Search pricing क्या होता है? Search pricing people get
demand ज़्यादा है तो price ज़्यादा है.
Exactly. Search pricing किस लिए होता है? Search pricing is basically done. It's a temporary phenomena where pricing increases that encourages people who may have logged off for the day. जैसे मैं अगर Uber में काम कर रहा हूँ, मुझे notification आता है कि इस समय अभी क्रिकेट का मैच खत्म हुआ है और अगर आप अभी चले जाएंगे आपको 3 गुना पैसा मिलेगा. Even though I've retired for the night, I'll switch on my app and go running and suddenly supply will flow into that area. When supply goes up, you will reach a point of equilibrium where now nobody is willing to pay and surge pricing will collapse. That is how free markets operate.
And I'm with you on this. That this is actually a mimicking of the offline behavior. अगर मैच होता था आरसीबी का यहाँ पे और ओला उबर से नहीं जाओगे और ऑटो पे जाके पूछोगे तो वो भी तो डबल प्राइस कोट करेगा. आधी रात को अगर आप ऑटो लोगे कहीं से तो वो भी डबल प्राइस कोट करेगा.
ऑटो वाले तो हमेशा डबल ही कोट
ऐसा नहीं बोला सर. बट वो तो फ्री मार्केट है ना, in the sense that if he knows that I will take it, he will charge me more, which is the behavior mimicked by the ads, right? On that note, it brings me one more point. There was a large hue and cry about government intervening in capping the prices of these companies, saying कि 29 रुपए और 30 रुपए per kilometer से ज़्यादा नहीं ले सकते. It was there sometime. I think Delhi government or something did it. What are your thoughts on this?
I think Delhi governments will always come and try to say that what price you can charge and what you cannot, and I'm absolutely okay with that.
Why?
And the reason for that is if you look at it, but as long as it's a level playing field, don't come and say that Uber and Ola cannot charge more than that, but you allow offline players to charge indiscriminately. Bring it to a level playing field and then let the customers decide.
But why not have a free market scenario here? I will pay.
No, you asked me, is it okay for I would like free markets to operate at any time. But if the government wants to come in and say, okay, because we have a policy for, let's say, an offline hailing product, therefore online we should have some level of parity, I'm comfortable with that. But just as you enforce those guidelines when it comes to these platforms, please enforce the same guidelines with the same level of vigilance that offline players are charging.
Okay.
Then it's fair. Otherwise, let both charge whatever they want and let the customers decide.
Got it. So the reason that I was discussing all of these things is that you are an investor in so many of mobility ecosystem companies, and government policies play such a big role in this business, right? Do you think, one question, do you think that all of these policies should be a center subject rather than a state subject, because it becomes so difficult to comply to all the policies according to every state? Or do you think there is merit in having them as state subjects?
Think where the way the federal government operates with state and center is that transport has and will remain a state subject. I think central government will always be mandated with giving broad guidelines on what you can and cannot do. So road tax has to be charged, fuel has to be taxed, you're allowed to operate and things like that. So I think it's a question. I don't think it's easy. It's not possible for the central government to dictate and centralize all of these policies. It will go down to state governments, and which I think is the right way. I think every state is different in their needs. There are different local challenges that are there. I think demand and supply are different, employment levels are different, income levels are different, needs are different.
And way different, not like.
Very different. I mean, it's difficult. There are, as you rightly said, you've spent a lot of time for Goa. Goa has a totally different setup, different supply, different income levels, and therefore different expectations to say Uttar Pradesh. So you can't really have the same policies in UP and Goa, and that's absolutely right. As an investor in mobility companies, what are we saying? All we're saying is that allow such platforms to operate, issue the necessary guidelines, and be ruthless in then ensuring that we follow those guidelines. If anything, what happens is not issuing the guidelines forces us to operate with ambiguity, which is what we don't want. We want to follow all the necessary guidelines. But if you don't issue them, then you keep shutting us down. It's very difficult for us to do that, run it for 6 months, shut it down for a month, then start it up again. It creates havoc. And I think it's a disservice to the people. अगर आपने decide कर दिया है कि ultimately central government ने बोला this should be done, please issue the guidelines. By all means, tell us what your concerns are. Is it safety? Is it security? Do you feel that this is going to take away jobs? You want them to get commercial driving license? Say that. You want them to get commercial insurance? Say that. You want them to go and register their vehicles as commercial vehicles? And issue the guidelines on how you can convert a privately registered vehicle to a commercial. If there is a payment to be made, you want to pay them to pay a certain fees. Issue that. We will help our suppliers, our captains as we call them, to make those necessary things. आप गाइडलाइंस इशू नहीं करते, फिर आप कहते हैं कि आप इलीगल हैं. हम कहते हैं देखिए हम तो वी आर द फर्स्ट टू से वी वांट टू बी 100% लीगल. वी वांट टू फॉलो द गाइडलाइंस टू द टी. But if there are no guidelines, then how do we operate?
Yeah. No, I feel the pain. In 2016, we were starting on bikes and we wanted bike rental license. We said we'll make the Zoom car for bikes and everything. It took us so many months to get license in different states. And then we went to Maharashtra and they said you can't, there's no, it's not allowed.
It was black number plate, self-driving rentals.
Yeah, and the logic was the same given for what is there in bike taxis here. And I'm like, कि लोगों को बॉम्बे से लोनावला जाने के लिए बाइक चाहिए वीकेंड पे. That is not going to affect your cabs or your autos and everything. It's a very completely different use case. Tell me one thing, is policy the biggest barrier in the company's growth or overall India's growth? Or is policy one of the biggest barriers that let's be honest?
Again, entrepreneurship's not easy. I mean, successful entrepreneurs are the ones who recognize that there will be challenges in every step of the day. I don't think policy is the biggest barrier. It's clarity. Okay. It is changing policies at the drop of a hat. मतलब एक दिन आप कहते हो कर सकते हो, अगले दिन कहते हो नहीं कर सकते हो, फिर कहते हो ऐसे करोगे, फिर कहते हो. I mean, as long as there's clarity and it's fair, I don't think I have a problem with policy. But I think it's important to recognize that all of us in all our startups, all our companies want to operate legally, 100%. Why would we want to be break the law in any form whatsoever? But tell us the laws that we need to follow. Now back to my point, it's not that we don't want to, लेकिन क्या follow करना है ये तो बताइए. But ultimately, I'll tell you, I have now been working with Indian entrepreneurs. They will build successful businesses irrespective of what challenge you throw to them. I think we're sitting in Bangalore, which is the mecca of startups. And I can tell you, nothing is going to hold back the Indian entrepreneur. Aapko policy, infrastructure, finance, capital, we will build in spite of all of that. I think we have resilience, we have grit, and we have determination. I've seen that not once, many times. Rapido is one example of founders who built in spite of having everything was against them. Very limited capital, no clarity in terms of policy, no infrastructure, creating a new category that didn't exist, low awareness. It was just all the challenges they built that. So for me, I don't think policy can ever stop us from creating successful businesses. We'll create them in spite of that.
Very nice to listen to that. Okay, but let's come to the electrification of India, so to say, right? EVs. So uske andar to it's not just about entrepreneurs building big businesses or great businesses. It's about I want to ask you, are we in the right direction when it comes to the policies that we have in India so that we can leapfrog to where you've written articles about $1 trillion economy on EVs, etc. So talk to me about policies in the EV sector. Are we on the right track? Is something lacking? Do you have some advice where you think that these things should be there? But as a layman, explain, are we on the right track when it comes to EVs in India?
Absolutely. I think transitioning from ICE, when we say ICE, we mean internal combustion agent, to EV is inevitable for a number of reasons. I think every time, ICE has been around in the world for more than 110 years. I think Ford Model T came out in 1920. 100 साल से ऊपर ICE हो गया है. I think in India, really ICE became prominent once Suzuki entered about 35 years ago. 1987 is, I think, when they entered. Almost 40 years now. EVs surprisingly been around for 50-60 years. So there was always EV that was happening in the back. But I'll tell you, what we've seen is that whenever in an industry, whether it's auto or anything else, you'll have a technology that's pretty much predominant, where billions of dollars have gone into its investment and it's fully depreciated, fully optimized. So that's ICE for you. Internal combustion agent, like I said, 100 साल से चल रही है. For that to be displaced by a new technology in this EV has to be significantly superior, cheaper and better. Otherwise, there's too much inertia by the existing players to that. And that is why we feel there's always a window of opportunities for startups. And EVs, Tesla, BYD, or in India, Ather. When legacy players are still looking at EVs as it's not, ये तो बच्चों का काम है, हम नहीं करेंगे, हम तो we are the ICE kings. That's the opportunity that exists, and people who understand that legacy players, because of the nature of their culture and organization, do not have the flexibility to adopt a technology like EV in this case at the same speed as startups can. And that's what we are backing on. Transition to hoega, India leapfrog karega, but I think that transition is going to be fundamentally different. We are not going to go the way of a US or China.
Okay.
And the reason is that US and China predominantly, I would say 97-98% of vehicles or vehicles on the road in the US and China are four-wheelers. And the biggest form of mobility there is personal mobility. India has actually flipped around. 70-80% of vehicles on Indian roads are two-wheelers, not four-wheelers. India is the largest two-wheeler market in the world. So we think that we may not be able to build world-class companies in four-wheeler EVs.
Yeah, I read your tweet. I wanted to understand. You said we've lost the battle when it comes to four-wheelers, but we might win the battle in two-wheelers.
Bilkul. And the reason for that is there is no world leader in two-wheeler EVs outside of India, because we are the leaders in EVs. Not just two-wheelers, we are the world leaders in tractors. We are the world leaders in three-wheeler. Three-wheeler product India के बाहर कहाँ दिखता है आपको?
When you say world leaders, you're saying the market
largest market in terms of volumes. India is the largest three-wheeler market in the world. India is the largest two-wheeler tractor market, one of the largest bus markets in the world, the largest commercial. So think about our strengths lies. Now, when I say that, when you change powertrain from ICE to EV, you don't have to recreate the whole ecosystem, right? Customer भी वही है, demand भी वही है, infrastructure में थोड़ा change करना पड़ता है, finance. So once you have a demand for three-wheelers, आप ICE को EV कर दोगे, that existing demand will start buying EV the next day.
सर एक एक करके चलते हैं. आपने बहुत सारे पॉइंट्स कवर कर दिया अभी, ठीक है. जो आप लेगेसी कंपनी और स्टार्टअप, दैट वाज अ सेपरेट थिंग आई वांटेड टू कवर, बिकॉज जब राजीव बजाज आके बोलते हैं कि चैंपियंस ईट ओट्स फॉर ब्रेकफास्ट.
देयर इज अ सेइंग, ब्रेकफास्ट ऑफ चैंपियंस. You know what champions eat for breakfast? Champions eat oats for breakfast. You know oats? Oats matlab Ola, Ather, Torque and Smarty.
एंड प्रोबेबली उस ओट्स में से सारे कंपनीज आपकी पोर्टफोलियो कंपनीज हो सकती है, मुझे लगता है. व्हेन राजीव बजाज सेज दैट legacy companies, he calls them champions, startups he calls them upstart, but that's humor. But isn't there logic there that the day that technology stabilizes or you find the right form factor, the big companies have the production and the assembly lines to then just take over most of the smaller players. Yeah. So are you saying that the opportunity for startups exists in this interim period only, or are we going to see more companies which are going to compete with this bet, as he calls it?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great question, and I think I'll give a slightly nuanced reply. Ultimately, what we feel is there are opportunities for startups to come and become pioneers in EVs across different form factors. So I think it's not going to be the same. Two-wheeler, four-wheeler, three-wheeler, buses, trucks, they will all have different rates of transitioning, right? One is, of course, personal mobility versus commercial. That is one element that we study very closely. Let me park it for that, but I'll answer your question. Even if you look at the world leaders in EV, they were those that were way ahead in terms of product rollout and technology than legacy people. Tesla is valued higher than all the other global OEMs combined. Right? At the end of the day, as an investor, my job is to create shareholder value. So of course, I will bank on a company that may not be the biggest in size in terms of volumes or revenue, but in terms of market value. Why is Tesla ahead of that? Because they are generation ahead of Ford and GM. If it was that easy, then let's look at America. Why is people, when they have a choice, when they want to buy an electric vehicle, तो Tesla क्यों खरीदते हैं? Ford क्यों नहीं खरीदते? Ford has EVs, GM has EVs, Toyota has EVs, सबके पास है. लेकिन लोग खरीदते क्या है? Model 3, Model Y, Model X, Tesla ही लेते हैं. When you look at EV, absolutely, that window of opportunity when EV is a very small percentage of the total sales is where companies like an Ather, who came in early, built a full stack, was able to gain brilliant products and is now gaining market share and value. Ola Electric is there. You've got so many other players in this space. But at some point, when the volumes become big enough, legacy OEMs will step in. 2-3 years ago, I went to Maruti and I asked them कि आप EV नहीं कर रहे हो, EV क्यों नहीं बेच रहे हो? तो उन्होंने बोला, I won't name them, but a very senior person, he says, कुणाल, पूरे महीने में कितनी EVs बिकती हैं? 20,000? कहता है अगर मैंने EVs निकाल भी दिए, so Maruti has about 45-50% market share, right? And they sell almost 2 million cars a year. He says, even if I get 70% market share of EV, I'll get 6,000 cars, 8,000 cars. Does that change my market share as a whole? No. He says, then I'll start EVs when EVs become 200,000 cars a month or 100,000 cars a month, when there is a little bit of a need. So they wait for those numbers to come up.
And in
And
that
they will.
in that interim,
By that time, as a challenger, you have to make sure that you've established yourself as a brand, you've raised enough capital to get distribution, and you probably have superior products. Ultimately, legacies have two things that a challenger doesn't have: brand and distribution.
okay.
Right? Maruti has that. Maruti today launches an EV. They'll be able to push that EV across to 200 plus cities across their 3,500 dealers. How long will it take for a challenger? Ather will have to take time to build. So that is that window of opportunity that is there. And that I'm talking about personal mobility. I think on the commercial side, there is
Huge space.
significantly more opportunities for new age guys to come in, because there the entire dynamics are different. So just an important data point, in India, 90% of vehicles are personal mobility, 10% are commercial.
Okay.
Right? Commercial माने तो where a vehicle is used to generate revenue. Ride sharing, logistics, delivery, public transportation, intercity buses. Do you know 10% of vehicles actually consume 70% of our fuel and energy, and that means contribute 70% of the pollution. So as a fund, we've picked up this data point, and it's our mandate now to electrify just this 10% of the use case. Hence, Rapido falls into it, Chalo falls into it, Shuttle falls into it, Razing bus falls in. These are all buses, vehicles. All the mobility people have commercial use cases. So what we're saying is, let's focus on that. So for us, we are not that excited about personal mobility. We are damn excited about electrifying commercial vehicles.
I'm saying, just as a country, you might have seen models in mobility models or EV transitioning in US or in China or whatever. So are we then on the right track? What will it take for us to beat China? Okay, let's put it that way.
I will answer this question says I'm not here to beat China. And I'll tell you, I think we have to stop comparing ourselves to China. It's for simple reason is I don't think China ever compares itself to America. I think ultimately, देखिए, China अलग है, हम अलग हैं. For us to compete and beat China, honestly speaking, we are a different country, we are a different customer, we have different needs, we are at a different income level, we are at a different stage. 30 years ago, we were ahead of China, 30, 35 years on a per capita basis. China is now 6x. So they've done a phenomenal job, all due respect to them, but at what price, at what cost? Instead of getting into they have no freedom, they don't have a democracy, let's forget about it. I think I would rather compare India to where we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. How are we improving the quality of life of people every day, every week, every month? That is probably a far more better way to give ourselves and challenge us to say, how can I make improvements every day? देखिए, China हमसे आगे है, but given है. हम आज से 5 साल बाद कहाँ, where do we want to be 5 years from now? Where do we want to be? There are, this reminds me of this story when after spending about 11 years in the US, my last job was in private equity. When I went to my boss and says, I'm moving back to India to start this company called Carnation Auto. He asked me, he's an American. He said, are you mad, Kunal? You got a private equity job. You want to go to India, that country, it has nothing works there. Everything's broken. There's no electricity, there's no this, there's no that. I smiled and I said, Frank, everything that you mentioned, everything's broken, nothing works. Everything that doesn't work is $1 billion opportunity to be built, right? So it's a question of glass half full, half empty. So that's philosophically what I believe. India is a land of opportunities. Policy aati rahengi. But I think we have to pick our battles clearly, right? I personally feel prioritizing 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, buses, public transportation. I think we should try to see how fast we can electrify commercial vehicles, and I'll tell you why, for 2 reasons. One is, like I mentioned, 70% of the pollution to wahin se aata hai. Number 2, they have faster TCO, faster payback. And the reason for that is, since they're being used for commercial purposes, they're generating revenue for the owner. Majority of commercial vehicles are owned by poor middle class people. Rapido wala driver, captain kahan se aata hai? Comes from underprivileged background. 3-wheeler owner kahan se? Electrification, actually the benefit of that is because our cost of an EV is significantly lower. Do we know we pay over 130% of tax on fuel?
Yeah.
अब आप सोचिए 100 बैंगलोर में पेट्रोल कितना है?
104 होगा ना.
आप देखिए बिजली 4 रुपए यूनिट है. So if you're able to convert and move away from diesel or CNG to electric, that individual, without doing anything else, can probably start taking home 20-25% more.
Yeah.
Imagine how the quality of life of that individual will change. Every bus driver, truck driver, three-wheeler, two-wheeler, people come from lower income levels. That is what motivates me every day. How do we improve the quality of life? All we have to do is make sure we take away the diesel and CNG, give him an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
That transition will be reformative. It will be the impact that we have on just it. And ultimately, your air pollution will come down.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win.
No, I remember in 2019 we did a survey in Pune. We were planning to launch electric cycles in that Hinjewadi area. It's all corporate area. And we did a survey and asked कि आपको फर्क पड़ता है कि as a consumer फर्क पड़ता है कि इलेक्ट्रिक है कि नहीं है? कुछ नहीं फर्क पड़ता है. All that matters is that cost per kilometer point A to point B क्या मुझे ownership का कम पड़ रहा है कि नहीं पड़ रहा है. And then we realized that our pitch does not have to be to make the environment green. That's like a corporate pitch deck, right? To get money. But all that matters is if the cost of ownership is lower than ICE, then I think the tables will turn. Okay, so as a VC, when you're investing heavily in this segment, anyone watching who wants to start something new, where are the gaps? Because it just seems like these are very intense businesses to build, right? I mean, even if it is an app, which is an aggregator app, or if it is an Ather, which is, start from scratch R&D, or bike taxis or whatever. These are very intense operation heavy businesses. Where do you think lies an opportunity for someone who wants to start?
I think there are opportunities everywhere. I think there is no business that starts off with, with a $1 billion or $2 billion value. You start with zero. So I'm sure when Ather started or Rapido started, they started with very realistic expectations of what they wanted to do. The ambitions might have been very high, but on an execution, like I normally refer to is entrepreneurship as a marathon race consisting of multiple 50-meter, 100-meter sprints, right? So that first focus on that first 100 meter. Don't worry where you're going to be. As an entrepreneur, your first challenge is to identify a gap or a pain point or a hair on fire problem that a certain set of customers have for which they're willing to pay. It could be something as small or as big, it doesn't matter. As long as it's unique, as long as it's a deep insight that you have. And go out there, build a proof of concept, go and get your first customer, 2 customers, sell them that product or service or technology. In fact, the most important factor that we look at when we make an investment is founder market fit, nothing else. इसका मतलब है जो फाउंडर आता है वो हमको he always comes and pitches a pain point, a problem. हमको 2 things we look for. One is that insight or that pain that they've identified something unique which nobody else has, and do they have a significant advantage over others to solve for that? Have they spent some time in that sector? Have they worked in that area? Is this something they have experienced personally? So as a potential entrepreneur, what insight do you have? Where did you get that insight? देखिए entrepreneurship 10-15 साल लगते हैं धंधा बनाने में और हमको पता है we are early stage investors. We do pre-product, pre-revenue investments, and what we've seen is in that 0 to 1 journey, founders, I can change everything about that partnership, right? I can change the product, I can change the customer segments, the GTM, the price. I can go from software to hardware. The only thing I can't change is the founder. So for us, that is why it's not just the founder, but the founder market fit. Technology is the other aspect, very important. We won't fund anybody, a tech company or a tech founder. If you're outsourcing tech, we're the wrong people for you. Opportunities हर जगह है, छोटी हैं कि बड़ी हैं. देखिए हमारा being a sector focused fund, I think that's where we are slightly different to others. If we say we are focusing now on trying to electrify commercial, now these are founders and businesses that we've been involved with for 8, 9, 10 years. We've got such deep insights onto what would it take to make Rapido electric or Chalo electric or Zingbus electric. So we already have a lot of the good idea what the missing pieces of this jigsaw puzzle is. So I like to take this at if the transition from ICE to EV is akin to the California gold rush, we are here to fund the picks and shovels companies. And those are the missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, which once the jigsaw puzzle becomes complete, that transition will happen in a faster way. So that is basically, and there are so many missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. something as simple as underwriting residual value, insurance, warranty, assurance products, getting into second-hand vehicle sales, getting into so many other, battery recycling is a pain point. There are so many different form factors that we need for different, the cost to build an electric vehicle is significantly less than to build an ICE vehicle. So you have so many companies building different form factors, single seater, slow speed scooter, double seaters. We have a 3-seater 2-wheeler company that we funded, because their insights is that typically when you're in bike taxis, you will always have 2 to 3 members, could be family or people carrying luggage. So the seaters now can accommodate 3 people. I think Aether Rishta also sort of like that.
Okay.
Big giant seat. Because that's an insight that we have. So आपको opportunities हर जगह है, execution पे निर्भर है.
No, I said that, mobility businesses are very intense businesses and you need founders with grit. But I think you're an investor with grit in the sense that because I've been into this space also, मेरे को बहुत मजा आया आपसे बात करके. When I used to have conversations, when we were building something, a lot of people used to say, यार ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता, utopian scenario है. तो मुझे ऐसी feeling आई, I feel that I'm transported 5 years back where we were talking about कि यार अच्छा ये नहीं हो रहा, ये हो सकता है, right? You can have 100% of the vehicles electric. You can have all the things running on green. You can have all the charging points here. These are very difficult problems, but you seem to be that person who's just in that zone where you can, reach that utopian, and that's what entrepreneurship is. And I really enjoyed. I think we are able to book a Rapido now for Kunal.
3 और तो book ही कर सकते हैं.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Akash. Thank you.